How to find home. Home. This is a happy story. This is an adventure. It began the night Rusby was released. Word got round that Jules was having a few bevies at a squat, and by the time I got there, it was crammed with half the homeless of Nottingham. It was kind of electric, the air that night. I could see it as soon as I stepped in. Bundles of energy hanging from the ceiling, little sparks flickering from the living room door, and onto the stained carpet in the hall. I decided to hover near the entrance, hanging up coats that had been dropped on the floor. I'm not a large groups type of person. But then Big Tony craned his neck into the hallway. His bald head was shining with sweat, eyes so wide you could see the white circling his irises. Moles, he hissed. I smoothed down the black back of the sheepskin coat and hooked it over a peg. Hi, Tony, I said. He reached for my arm, nodding back towards the party. Quick, he said. He's a strong, beefy man, is Big Tony, neck thick as an ox, but his grip was gentle as he led me through the dancing bodies and past those slumped against walls, peppered with graffiti. Sweat and alcohol soured the air, lights low, music thumping through boxy speakers. I walked on tiptoes to avoid the debris and then spotted Jules by the boarded up windows. She was jumping up and down with a can in one hand, her other hand slicing backwards and forwards to the beat. Her chestnut hair, usually pulled tight in a ponytail, had come loose on the sides. Ash fell down her camouflage jacket as she puffed away on a cigarette. She didn't seem bothered by it. That's the thing with Jules. When she's in the zone, she's not bothered by anything. I wanted to get her attention so we could talk about Big Tony, but Big Tony was taking me over to the corner of the room where a lava lamp, purple with fluorescent pink wax, sat crooked on a beer carton. Speak to this fella, Moles, he said. I can't handle him. I looked down at the lad sitting cross-legged on the floor. He can't have been much older than me, early to mid-20s, and was wiry like one of those dolls with legs and arms that stretch into spaghetti. His skin was a pale caramel brown, his afro square like Lego. Logic was stenciled in bold letters on his canary yellow t-shirt. I looked at Big Tony, mid-40s, 6'4", convicted of grievous bodily harm at least 4 times in his youth. He looked back at me, dabbing the sweat from his head. And I'll stop.
Oh, that was lovely. Thank you. I can see Big Tony. I can feel him and his gentle touch and everything. That's incredible. Thank you so much. So you've won a couple of quite big prizes, Bristol Short Story Prize and the SI Leeds Literary Prize, and you were named 2017 October Observer New Face of Fiction. So you've obviously been validated by the external world as a writer, but when and how did you first know that you were a writer?
So I'm one of those annoying people that knew since I was I remember specifically 8 years old that I wanted to be a writer, because that's when I remember being told that writing was a living. You could have writing as a living. And as soon as I realised that was a prospect, that's what I knew I wanted to do, because I loved stories. I escaped into stories. I grew up on a council estate. We were the only Asian family on the estate, so we didn't go out much. So books were my world. So the idea that I could write stories myself was so exciting. And that's when I knew that's what I wanted to do, and pretty much planned that that's what I was going to do. I was going to be a writer.
Wow, so right back then. So who was it told you that you could earn a living from writing?
It was just a normal English lesson where you're shown a book and you said there's an illustrator who makes the pictures, there's a publisher who does the book, and there's a writer who writes the words. And I was like, oh, that's a thing, I can do that. That's something I could do as a living. So it wasn't even like explicit. It was just kind of figuring out, oh, this is something that could be a potential job.
That's something that doesn't happen in schools very much, isn't it? Actually being told about the book production process.
Yeah, and then I remember as well, because I remember really vividly that we then went on and did our own little book. We made our book. We had a publishing house for it. I did the logo for it. I remember that. And we kind of made these little book series ourselves in our class. So that was a really good little lesson for us.
That's brilliant. Yeah, there should be more of that.
They should.
Nottingham City of Literature, are you listening? Writing East Midlands, run with it. So you've published 2 novels, and working on your 3rd?
Yeah, so not very recently, from probably the beginning of the year, I've started working on book 3. I had a lot of other projects going on last year, so I thought I'll really focus on book 3 this year. And then obviously everything happened that we're all stuck in now. But I've been able to just carry on with that, which is the brilliant thing about writing. You can do that from home, and I have been working from home before. I had to work from home, so it wasn't too bad a transition to carry on with that.
You said you were doing lots of other activities last year. I mean, looking on your website, you've produced your own short videos about the writing craft and how to write, which are really neat, and I suggest people check them out if they haven't seen them already. What other sorts of activities do you do around writing? Because you're quite active, aren't you?
Yeah, so last year was the first year where I think I started to get a lot of work coming my way without me having to pursue it. So I was commissioned for the Colonial Countryside project, which is a really exciting project that's looking at the colonial connections of National Trust properties, and was in the making for probably 2 years. So the fact that now we have a lot more awareness about Black Lives Matter and the protests that's been happening around that, it really strongly links to the Colonial Countryside project and what they're trying to do, which is just make us realise we have alternate histories that we don't know about because they've been hidden, but they're there. Those histories are there. So I was writing a series of short stories to do with Kedleston Hall, which is in Derbyshire, and its colonial connections because a former viceroy of India was brought up in Kedleston. So that was a brilliant project to be part of. I'm still part of it, still waiting hopefully for that to get published by People Tree Press, which is a great indie press.
Yeah.
And also I got some commissions, so I also did audio kind of, I didn't do the audio, but I wrote for audio for Audible, kind of reworking of a folk tale which was from Staffordshire. So again, local, which I love because I love doing local stuff. So I was commissioned to write a reworking of that a folk story of a panther that got set loose in this countryside house, which is a great myth, the story that happened. And then that was put onto Audible. So I've been working on stuff like that. So as well as trying to work on novels and stuff. But yeah, I'm really able to. And I was doing some mentoring actually for Nottingham City of Culture as part of their mentoring program with their ambassadors, which was really great. So I had lots of stuff like that. But this year, I think it's really going to be novel. Hopefully, it's going to be all the next novel.
Do you find it easy to sit down and write, or do you have to sort of force yourself to structure some time in and tell yourself to your desk?
It's fine once I get started. I think that's probably the same for a lot of writers, but it's really important for me that I schedule that time in and I treat that as work time, because it is my work time. But even before I was a professional writer, that I treated that as work time, and I will make sure that I've got a whole list of things I've got to do, but I always make sure I schedule that writing time in, because that is the most important thing really for me to focus on, and you can get distracted by admin and other little things. So yeah, if I get it scheduled in, it usually gets done.
Good. So how has all this current lockdown madness and everything affected your writing life?
I think at the beginning, with like a lot of people, I found it very difficult to concentrate on creative writing when the whole world was suffering from a global pandemic, and the worry and the anxiety that came with that. I think for me, like I said, I'm in the fortunate position that I was kind of working from home already. The major difference is I have my 3-year-old around a lot more, which makes life difficult. And again, that means that when I do get writing time, I am very focused on writing, because I don't have the liberty of just having all day, because if I thought that when you had a kid, you'd be able to write and they could play, and it doesn't work that way.
No, it really doesn't.
So when I've got her, I've got to really like focus on that, and that means that when I do have writing time, I have to really focus on that. So it's made me more disciplined in a way. My husband's working at the hospitals. He's a physiotherapist. So, and he worked in intensive care during the kind of really horrible period of COVID. So it was hard at the beginning, because you're just thinking there's all these amazing people doing this amazing work, and you realise you're not an essential worker for a start. Yeah. Being a writer is not essential. And then what can you do to help? And what can you do? So the thing I do best is writing, so I try to focus on that. And then I did decide that I'd do the YouTube series of kind of writing workshops, like mini writing workshops, so that I was hopefully helping in some way people who I know that they're in lockdown were thinking of writing more.
So it sounds like it's possibly made you more productive.
Yeah, I feel I was pretty productive before, but I think it's probably given me a different focus. I'm not getting distracted by events and by going out, which has its pros and cons. Yeah. But it has meant that I've been really able to think, what do I want to get done in the next few months? Because it doesn't look like we're going to be socializing or doing the normal things, like even doing book festivals, which I really love doing in the summer, and that now we're not able to do that. What can I do with this time? So it has made me really think about what I want to be doing, and yeah, so I have been pretty productive during this period. But it comes and goes, I think, because sometimes you really feel like you're ready for it, and sometimes, you know, I mean, at the minute Leicester's back in lockdown, so that's been a bit of a hit, and that can emotionally can just put you like, we started making plans about what we were going to do, and now we can't do it. That kind of sets you off course a bit. So I think everybody's on a bit of a roller coaster at the minute.
Yeah, I agree. Have you discovered any surprising inspirations for your writing from the situation? Because it's all very different, isn't it? The world just seems to have suddenly completely turned upside down.
Yeah, I think I mean, I don't think I'll be writing about COVID. I think so many writers will be doing that, and there'll be a lot of stuff out there in a year or two. But at the minute, I think it's really interesting just to see what the life is like for people in lockdown, and how suddenly our priorities change, and what really actually matters to us, which for a lot of people I think is, we don't miss shopping. That's not the thing that made the difference. Is we miss people, we miss seeing people, and I think that's been a sudden realization for a lot of people, and that's, I think, a positive thing. I think as well, but during this period, because we've had the Black Lives Matters protests, I feel like there's a sea change there happening, and I feel we're just going to hopefully come out of this period with a different way of looking at the world, because we've been forced to do that. We've been forced to actually sit down, reflect, and think about what's important. So that, I think, is going to be, it's going to affect my writing in some way, because I don't see how it can't. There's these two massive things happening in the world right now. But yeah, I don't think that will mean I will write a COVID book or one about COVID, but definitely the lessons we've learned, I think, from this period will influence me.
Yeah, you mentioned Black Lives Matter. That's I mean, it's been going on for years, and it's been needing to go on for years, but somehow in the pandemic context, it seems to have become more important and more visible and more possible.
Yeah, there is definitely a different feeling about this particular set of protests that we've been, obviously there's been protests for many years about particularly about Black people's rights, and especially in America where people are getting murdered. But there is something about this time where I feel like people are really listening. People have the time to actually go and research. So people are asking for more books by Black writers, and they're going and reading them. And we've seen that in the sales of non-fiction and fiction sales. So the fact that people are not just saying, oh yeah, I know there's a problem and something needs to be done, they're actually going and researching it. And I think that is to do with the pandemic and the fact we have more time to do that. means that I think people are actually taking it seriously in a way that I have not seen before. So yeah, I think of it, I see it as positive, but we have been down this road before as well, so I have to remember that. And especially within publishing, there's always a new diversity kind of initiative going, but it doesn't ever really seem to make the impact that you would like it to make. So hopefully this will make a change in that, especially now that publishers are seeing that Black authors and BAME authors can sell books, that there'll be a bit of a sea change there.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, we've been thinking at the bookshop of what we can do to support the movement, and what we as booksellers and as publishers, and how writers can support it. We haven't come up with any grand solutions yet.
Well, I think the
we're
great thing
working
about bookshops, and the great thing about Fively, is, which I know is a radical bookshop, so you've already got a lot of those books already about and the history of protest, the history of racism. You've got those books, so just highlighting those books, I think, is just it's just a great way of supporting the movement. And you'll probably have a good knowledge of those indie books that nobody really knows about, that the books from Black authors that aren't shouted about. So just shouting about those books, I think, would make such a difference.
Yeah, well, we're certainly doing that.
Yeah,
and we'll keep doing that.
Yes, that's important as well, to keep doing it, and it's not just during Black History Month, it's not just during the protest, that we do it throughout the year. We do it for different groups, and we not just Black authors, not just BAME authors, for LGBTQ plus authors, for disabled authors, so all those underrepresented groups, that we kind of think of, not just do it for a short period, that we think about those underrepresented groups throughout the year. and highlight those voices that we don't hear. I mean, I'm really passionate about voices we don't hear from normally, so to just highlight those voices. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, that's one of the main reasons Ross loves bookselling, I believe. I have to ask him. So I mean, it's all about community, really, isn't it? It's about publishers and booksellers and writers working together with the wider community. But as a writer, I've found it's really important to have a writing community of my own. Is that something that's important to you?
Yes, I mean, I used to be part of Leicester Writers Club, and unfortunately, because of time and deadlines and everything, I don't go as physically anymore. But it was really important to me when I was developing as a writer to have that group and to hear other voices and have criticism and feedback. So that's always been useful to me. But I do find, obviously, it's difficult now with restrictions of being able to meet with people anyway. So I think being able to just talk to fellow writers, whether it be Zoom or email or WhatsApp at the minute, it does really help. I mean, I've got a great little freelance group in my local area who meet up. So just, we're not all writers. In fact, I think I'm the only writer. The rest do different things. But I just think being able to communicate with people who are in the same position as freelancers is really helpful. And also that's part of the reason I did the YouTube series, is to be able to maybe give to the writing community a bit, to people who can't access other people necessarily at the minute. So I think we can find community in lots of different ways, hopefully.
That's, I mean, what you say about a group of freelancers, it's something a lot of writers don't do, is mix with people who aren't writers and work with people who aren't writers. But it's quite important, isn't it? I mean, what do you get out?
Because we are at home most of the time. We have got quite isolated lives as writers, and so it would be very easy to just mix with other writers. To be fair, though, there's not that there's not many writers in Leicester, but there's, I don't have lots of people in my local community. So actually, it's been really brilliant connecting with freelancers, because I've got an artist in the group, somebody who does equality in the workplace, somebody who does knitting patterns for magazines, and it's just really interesting talking about the creative process, even though we don't all do the same thing. So it's really, I find it, I think you need to find your tribe, and I found a tribe with those as it happens, women, and so whether it's a writing community or just a community of people who are sharing the same experiences, I think it can really uplift you, especially when you don't have a regular workplace to go to.
Yeah, I agree. And also I think you probably get a more rounded community if you don't just mix with writers.
Yes, yeah, that's probably accurate.
Please, writers, don't shoot me.
Well, it depends as well. If in your writing community you all write the same stuff, then that's going to be very limited. If you all write different, like if you mix with sci-fi writers and fantasy writers and more contemporary writers and poets, and I mean, I know that's what my Leicester Writers group had, writers writing all different genres. You kind of learn something different from each person. So I think it is all about diversity in a different way in this. But yeah, diversity in genre can make a massive difference as well.
This is true, yes. Okay, next question. Who inspires you? Not necessarily writers, anyone who's inspired your work.
I think for me, when I think about who inspires me, I always think about, I mean, before this pandemic, I always think about ordinary people who are kind of on the front line, and now it's even more the case that, especially my husband works in the hospitals, thinking about all the care workers out there who get paid very little to do what they're doing, but and suddenly we're realizing who are the essential workers of the country. Those are the people who really inspire me, because they do their work kind of without much complaint and without much pay, because they love being able to help the community. And I used to be a teacher, so I kind of know that felt like being on the front line as well. So,
I can imagine.
So those people who are kind of doing those kind of almost thankless jobs but are much needed, I always really admire those people. And I think in this period especially, and I hope it doesn't go away, that we really have shown that appreciation for NHS staff in particular, and that we continue to do that and don't forget about those people, because they really do help run this country.
Yeah, agreed. It would fall apart without them. Now, this is a question everyone I've asked so far has absolutely hated. What are you most proud of in your writing career?
Right. Yes, it's a funny one, pride. I think especially in Britain, where we're not great at shouting about what we were proud of. But I think for me, being a person who grew up on a council estate from an Asian family, we were the only Asian family on the council estate, in Leicester, the fact I got published at all, I'm incredibly proud of, because especially now, I think we're realising how underrepresented groups find it so difficult to crack into the publishing industry. It's incredibly tough. And I do think like not being in London makes a massive difference as well. So I'm just really proud that I kind of went on, and I had that dream from the 8 years old that I would be a writer. I didn't really question it. I just kind of went with it, and I persisted and I persisted. And there were times where I really did want to give up, and times when I all kind of gave up and then realized I can't really give it up, because writing is really a part of me. And I feel kind of weird not doing it. So I have to do it. But I'm really glad I kept on pursuing that line of trying to crack mainstream publishing. Not that it had to be mainstream publishing, but I think for myself, coming from a deprived background, an underrepresented background, I wanted to know I could do it, that I could be mainstream published, that it wasn't an impossible dream. So that, I think that's probably the proudest thing, is that I actually was able to do that, because otherwise, if I hadn't ever got published and I got to this point, I think I'd still be writing, but I'd probably start getting a bit bitter about the whole
So
industry, but really there is no space for people who have different voices.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. It is difficult cracking into publishing for anyone, let alone people from underrepresented groups. And both your books are with Penguin Random House, aren't they?
Yes, so
imprints
they're
off.
part of they're published by Transworld, which is part of Penguin Random House. Yeah.
So how did you actually get your first publishing deal? I'm just sort of vaguely interested.
Well, it was a long process.
Yeah.
So I wrote the first version of my debut novel, The Things We Thought We Knew, when I was 16. I say that, but it wasn't polished already in any form. But then I came back to it, and I thought I'd been entering lots of things. I'd written another novel that hadn't got anywhere, and I thought I'm going to rewrite it from the beginning. And I sent it to competitions. So I sent it to the Dyslexia novel competition. I was runner-up in that competition. I sent it to the SI Leeds Prize, and it won the SI Leeds Prize. And via that process, between those two competitions, where before I'd sent to lots of competitions, not got anywhere, suddenly I won the Bristol Short Story Prize, which is a big short story
That's huge,
international short story prize.
Mm.
And with those like wins and runner-ups, I started to get attention from agents. Instead of me approaching other people, agents started approaching me. I got agent interest, and through that I then was able, and even then, even after I got an agent, it wasn't a smooth road. It still took a while for me to actually get the publishing deal, and I had a baby. Like pretty much I got pregnant and I got the publishing deal when I was like in the last week of my pregnancy, which
Oh,
is
wow.
typical of life. I think that's when it would happen, but also amazing.
Yeah. How do you find relationships with agents? Does it have to be good?
I think, I mean, mine is good. I'm not going to say anything else, but it's
Well,
good.
no,
But
obviously.
it is a good one because, and it was really important because I did actually get to the point where I had 3 agents. I actually had an agent, and I lost an agent because she moved on to working in a different field. And so with that backing and having won a few prizes, I decided to contact 5 agents, and 3 of those agents came back to me and wanted to meet. And so I was in a very privileged position to be able to do that, to go and basically interview agents. But what was really important to me is that I got on with the agent, not necessarily on a personal level, but on the sense that they knew what my book was about. They knew they got what I was trying to convey through it. And the person I chose was James Wills from Watson Little, was just so enthusiastic about the book, just really got what I was trying to do. And that's what you need with an agent, because they're the ones who are going to try and pass that enthusiasm over to editors and publishing houses. So I just knew kind of pretty straight away with him that he was so passionate about that book that he was the agent for me.
Yeah, so okay.
But I do think it's important. But I think sometimes new writers just feel they should go with a first agent that gives them an offer. But honestly, if you meet up with them and you really don't feel there's a click, and you really don't feel that they've got the same image or vision for what your novel is going to be, then you have the right to say no. You have the right to say no. You know what? I'm going to go and keep on looking for somebody.
Yeah.
You don't just have to go with the first person.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's same with publishing deals, isn't it? If you get a deal with a publishing house and it just doesn't feel like your work fits there, then you can say, actually, I'd quite like the money, but it's not going to work.
Yeah, and I think you've got to decide as well what's more important to you, because if it's the money, then that's fine, go with the money. And I know there's writers who do that, but I know for me it wasn't about the money. It was really about me being, like I say, with somebody who got what I was doing and why I was doing it, especially because I am writing about underrepresented groups. You know, I don't want that to be tangled along and then made into something it's not. So that was more important to me, that it was a publishing house that understood what I was doing with my work. The money is nice, obviously, especially because I didn't have any at the time. But it wasn't my priority. But I think it is different for different writers.
Yeah. Okay, last question. What do you hope to achieve in the future? And you can be as general or specific as you like.
I think that's probably a harder question for me to answer than the what are you proud of? I think for me, like I say, I've noticed over the last few years, the work I enjoy the most is the work where I'm working with those, either the kids or the writers who you just were like me, you wouldn't expect to be writers, because we don't see them in the publishing industry. I really enjoy working and helping people who are underrepresented and writing about underrepresented groups. So there's a couple of things hopefully coming up in the future where I can carry on doing that type of work. But yeah, I just want to, I guess, amplify those hidden voices in whatever I do, whether it be a writing, or whether it be mentoring, or whether it be judging a competition. So I find that really difficult to know what do you want for the future. I think you just I take things by step. So
yeah,
it's the novel right now. It's I am actually coming up to judging the Aurora Prize for writing East Midlands, so I'm looking forward to doing that. So it's just doing those things step by step. And my dream as a child was always to be a full-time writer, so I am actually currently in that position, which is amazing. So I just want to keep that going for as long as I can.
That's brilliant. That's really, really good. Thank you so much. Do you have a reading that you'd like to finish with?
I do. So I thought I'd finish, seeing as Five Leaves is set in Nottingham, with a little Nottingham passage. If you sit by Nottingham Castle, where the tourists stand with maps and baseball caps and eyes that look without seeing, you'll hear a busker who, when he sings, bleeds his soul. You have to look real hard, but when you do, you can see tendrils of liquid light running out from the cloth of his parka and the wire of his beard. They seep into the ether like magic. When he batters the strings of his guitar, the earth trembles, the sky cracks into pieces, and the tourists look away. They pose for pictures at the Robin Hood statue with V signs and forced grins. They pretend they can't see the man with a flat cap bleeding all over the cobbled streets below. But behind the grins, you can see panic, because even though they can close their eyes, they can't shut their ears. It scares them, this voice, because they've never heard singing where the heart is being drained, never heard notes bellowed from the pit of something dark and wonderful. Jules says the busker's psychotic, that he glassed a man once for telling him his shoelaces were undone. She says I should quit watching him every time I pass, that my sobbing will be the undoing of us both. I tell her it's not sobbing, just a quiet emotion. She says that's enough. Emotional people can't cope with the emotions of others. Best keep your distance, doll. But I can't keep my distance. I keep going to the castle to watch the busker, to let him know someone can hear him, to let him know someone can see him. You become invisible when you live on the street. People avert their gaze when they walk past, look straight through you when you speak. I used to think this was a good thing, that this meant you could truly disappear. But now I know that when you stop being seen, you stop existing. And when you stop existing, that's when you give up.